Welcome to Chapter 11 of The Divide. Please like and subscribe. It had been 2 days since the water volleyball match. In that time, Julia and Yolanda became better and better friends, while Maddie happily lived the loner life. That is, of course, when he wasn't hanging out with Julia or trying to be around when Yolanda was hanging out with Julia. It was lunchtime, and Maddie was on a mission. Ever since hearing those screams, or possible screams, he tried to get down that staircase and see where they led. However, wherever he went, Hans would always be there, watching him, following him, and telling him to go. So today was the day to try and win Hans over. Maddie's empty stomach grumbled as he went to sit down in the lunchroom. And like clockwork, after sitting no more than 5 seconds later, Hans appeared, sitting directly across the table. "I have to say," Maddie spoke to Hans, "you are graceful on your feet for such a big fella. Cat-like, my friend." Of course, Hans replied with a blank-faced no reply. Maddie then lifted onto the table a wooden lunchbox wrapped in linen cloth. He then unwrapped it slowly in front of Hans. Briefly glancing up, Maddie could see one eyebrow of curiosity raised on Hans' face. Maddie then softly and gently slid the wooden box open to reveal his dinner from the night before and also the breakfast from this morning. First to catch Hans' eye were the eggs. And not just any eggs, but eggs so fluffy they seemed to defy gravity. And to make them more scrumptious, they were sitting atop a golden bed of pancakes that looked as if they were still steaming with morning dew. "These pancakes," Maddie spoke as he gave them a whiff. "They aren't just food, Hansi. They are literally sunshine captured and served on a plate, each bite promising a burst of maple and buttery bliss." Hans next shifted his energetic eyes beside Maddie's uneaten breakfast to see the remnants of last night's dinner, a medley of steel-cut potatoes, crisp on the outside, tender within, their edges caramelized to a perfect hue. "Forbidden amber, my friend," Maddie spoke as he leaned his eyes in close to the potatoes. He then continued, "The potato. Rugged, unspoken heroes of many meals, Whispering tales of fireside feast and joyful mouthfuls of tasty Irish love shared under the stars." "That's some good lovin' there, isn't it, Hans?" Hans started to lick his lips in excitement. After all, they were at lunch, but lunch had not yet been served. Maddie slowly pushed the box across the table. "You've been such a good friend to me ever since I arrived here, Hans," he spoke. "So I thought I would offer you these tasty beauties. That is, of course, if you like." Before Maddie could finish, Hans grabbed the box and began to maul the insides like a polar bear eating a seal. It was not a pretty sight, yet Matthew's plan was working. Within 1 minute flat, Hans ate everything. He then looked up to Maddie and slowly spoke, "Good." Maddie smiled as he thought, "Good. That's 2 more letters than the word go, which is all that he ever said to me before. Progress. A few more breakfasts that I must sacrifice at the altar of Hansi, and I'll be down that staircase in no time." Just across the lunchroom, Julia was sitting with Yolanda, ready to eat. Yolanda usually sat with Clarice, Bree, and Yuki. However, since the water volleyball match, Clarice had unleashed her full Ice Queen powers on Yolanda, not talking to her or even looking at her. Yolanda, being the true whatevs type of person that she was, didn't care much at all about Clarice's newfound hatred towards her. Truthfully, she was never too fond of Clarice to begin with. Their friendship was more forced since Yolanda's father also worked at Eminence and he worked closely with Clarice's father, Mr. Intersphere. Despite Yolanda's dad working at the school, Julia hadn't met him yet. The reason being since he worked as an emissary of sorts, traveling the world, promoting Eminence or creating opportunities for graduates of Eminence. Today, interestingly enough, Yolanda's father was returning from a trip and would be back at the school. "You must be excited to see your dad," spoke Julia. "How often is he here?" "Not that often, actually," she replied with little emotion in her voice. "He travels a lot for the school." "Oh, that's unfortunate," Julia said. "I thought you would be able to see him all the time." "Well, how about your mom? I know parents can't visit often, but I bet she video calls a lot, right?" "She would," answered Yolanda, "but it's hard to use a phone when you're dead. Something about no fingers to touch the phone, no mouth to speak, and no brain to think." Julia looked at Yolanda, shocked, not knowing if it was a joke or not. "Wait," Julia spoke concerningly. "Are you serious?" "Yep," Yolanda replied. "Dead people can't video call. And yeah, my mom is dead." Julia answered as best and as caring as she could. "I'm so sorry, Yolanda. When did it happen?" "Around 5 years ago," Yolanda replied, now feeling a bit awkward and grief-stricken. "Anyway," she continued as she tried to change the subject, "how about your parents? I mean, we all know your dad is in jail for not looking after you when you were in the shopping mall. But how about your mom? Is she alive, or what's her story?" Julia was extremely happy Maddie wasn't there, or he would have blurted out something about their mom's drug addiction and complete lack of care. "She's around," Julia replied, as vague as possible. "She just lives a little far away, so I wouldn't really expect her for any visits." "And your dad?" Yolanda asked. "When is he scheduled to get out?" "He was sentenced to 4 years," Julia answered. "But I'm not too sure if his sentence could be reduced for good behavior or not. Maddie, he would know more. He communicates with our dad regularly through letters." There was a pause in their conversation, as if both were stuck in the mud, not wanting to pry any deeper and possibly offend the other. "So," Yolanda spoke to break the awkwardness, "have you seen Ryan the last few days?" She then gave Julia a goofy grin, implying that Julia was interested in him. "No, not really," Julia answered. "I mean, only when he swims in the morning." "Okay, stalker," Yolanda mentioned with a laugh. "I bet you watch him all the time out of your window, don't you?" "Oh, shut up," Julia replied, also laughing. "Hey, I have a question, though," Julia continued. "A few days ago, I noticed his wrist had a wound on it. It was recent and it looked bad. Any idea on how that would have happened?" Yolanda thought out loud. 3 options. 1, all the students do military training here, like serious stuff. Our lesson is tomorrow, actually. So maybe he got injured doing that. Or option 2, when juniors transition to become seniors at this school, they all do a summer adventure trip somewhere. There are always seniors coming back injured, come to think of it. Probably what happened to Ryan. He was goofing around, fell off a kayak, something like that. Who knows? "And," Julia asked, "what's the 3rd option?" "Oh," Yolanda replied, "he got hurt from fighting off all those creepy stalker stare downs you give him." They both bursted out in laughter as Julia threw her napkin at Yolanda. Julia loved this moment, a true connection with a friend. So she decided not to ruin it by saying what kind of wound she thought it actually was. Because that wound looked exactly like one of her gunshot wounds on her stomach. Julia thought. I wonder what happened on Ryan's summer class trip.